there are hundreds of millions of dollars that are going into the state of Missouri, but not through the state's treasury, not through the state of Missouri's agencies. The federal departments grant directly to, for instance, every single public and private higher education institution for Pell Grants and work-study programs. If you go online to www.recovery.gov, which is the federal website for reporting, you'll see that there, you can dig down in there and you can find reports for Missouri recipients, and you'll see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them that are not the state of Missouri. What I'm going to be talking about are the dollars that, that the General Assembly appropriated, that the state administers in one fashion or another, and that come through the state treasury. But I think it's important to bear in mind that the scope is much larger than that. On top of the program dollars that are being granted by federal agencies directly to cities and counties and local nonprofits, there's over $100 million in contracts that have been let to Missouri vendors directly by federal agencies, the Department of Defense, the National Forest Service, and others. So there is an awful lot of money coming into the state of Missouri that's not reflected in the numbers that I'm going to talk about. It's been an incredibly busy 6 months, even though you may not feel that the spending or receipt logs would demonstrate that. Though there was a lot of confusion on the front end, what the stimulus bill actually ended up doing in Missouri was increasing the annual appropriations, federal dollars, for about 50 different programs. Almost all of those were previously existing, and many of them had been around for years and years and years. And this time, through the stimulus bill, they got an increase in funding that ranged from a 50% increase to a more than 20 times increase. Those programs all were treated by the federal government starting the 1st of March as brand new programs. So for the federal government to start up 50 new programs that we will administer, we then had to go through 50 different application processes, 50 different approval processes, 50 different contract negotiations between us and the federal agencies that are administering each one of those 50 programs. Then for us to turn around and negotiate the contracts with our subgrantees or our vendors, we have approximately 4,000 subrecipients that will be receiving the next step down the chain from the state agency that administers each of those programs. The total number of people at that next step on the chain is about 4,000 different entities. And when you include the vendors who are not subgrantees, but actually the people at the end of the line, the people that actually are paying payroll and performing services or delivering a good, you get to about 10,000 different entities that will be that are at the very bottom of the pyramid of this money. Each one of those subgrantees and vendors has to have an agreement with the state agency that is administering the program. Those agreements have to have all the normal things that the state has in its terms and conditions, plus the enormous baggage that the federal government included with the stimulus bill. A bunch of new terms and conditions that had never been part of what they required of us or that they required us to require of our subgrantees and our vendors. Included in that baggage, but by no means all of it, by no means most of it, was an entirely new level of reporting. They are requiring not only more reporting from more sources and farther down the chain, but on more data elements. And so each of these steps on the chain, each of these links in the chain is required to gather information that they've never had to gather before. So on the one hand, it is just like we have 50 programs that are just getting a little bit more money. On the other hand, and from an administrative point of view, it's like starting up 50 new programs. And they are similar, they do similar work, but the terms and conditions, the mechanics of running it are not similar. They've been much more stringent. Somewhere along the line, when Congress was debating whether or not and how to do a stimulus package, they went from giving the states a very few large and discretionary pots of money to what we ended up with, which is giving the state a very large number of relatively small and almost utterly non-discretionary pots of money. That being said, in the last 6 months, each of the state agencies has worked their way through that workload, and we are now through that first phase where all 50 of those programs are either at, past, or on the verge of completing that process of getting applications made, getting approvals made, getting contracts up the chain with the federal government and down the chain with their sub-grantees and vendors.